down the line, probably after some of us are already dead. Our children and our grandchildren are going to inherit this, and I think that we need the scrutiny. We need transparency. We need scrutiny, and we need stronger provincial and federal government regulation on this to make sure that this reclamation is done properly. It's also never been demonstrated, I believe, at least no one has shown me concrete evidence scientifically that the tailings ponds can even be reclaimed. The oil company guys will tell you that they can, and I'm not saying that they can't, I'm just saying that it hasn't been demonstrated yet. And the impression that I get when I weigh everyone's perspectives here is that there are a lot of intelligent people working this problem right now, but that there's a stampede, there's a gold rush that we haven't seen in North America since 1849. And it's slowed down a little bit because of the recession, but it's going to pick up as the cost of a barrel of oil gets to that threshold level, which it's hovering at right now, and will almost certainly go beyond, at which point it's going to accelerate. And the curve is going to go, quite steeply. And what I'm seeing is there are a lot of gray areas. I believe that given this huge economic incentive to Alberta, that the resources should be made available. Because it will be worth it in the long run. It will be a good investment in the future to do the science and to make sure that the science is transparent, that it's open to the public, that it's not funded by industry, that it's independently, that there's independent oversight, that there's proper peer review, and that the policies that come out of it the policies that are enacted, the regulations that are enacted, are based on science. Based on proper studies, not oil company studies, because they'll bring in studies this thick that they're happy to pay for because it makes a good prop on the table at a hearing or at a press conference like this. But independent science, and I think that the world is looking at what you here in Alberta do, and the decisions that are made here are really going to shape the energy policy of the future. Of course, our the energy policy where I live in the United States is it's brain dead, just slowly coming out of a coma, right now, and right down there we're looking at a government system that's relatively paralyzed when it comes to energy. They can't even use the term, and I've heard this directly from the mouths of senators who are trying to introduce energy legislation, that they can't even use the term. They can't even use the term climate change. So, I say all this as by way of preamble to what's really the key issue before us here today, which is the impact on the First Nations communities and on the natural habitats of Alberta, on which they survive to some extent with their traditional hunting and fishing, and it's a part of their diet. And there have been, certainly there's a lot of evidence, and George Poitras brought it to my attention when we met at when I was in New York for the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. George came to me and Francois, who did the invocation, and they told me this story of what's happening in Fort Chipewyan. And when I met with Premier Stelmach today, he gave the floor to his Minister of Environment, or sorry, Minister of Health, to in a sense kind of rebut this claim, and they had a study, of course, and I find that inconclusive, simply because the people in Fort Chipewyan are afraid to drink their own water. They're afraid to eat the fish. They're afraid of the river. They're afraid to let their kids swim in the river. Now, I grew up swimming in a river on the Niagara Peninsula. That's where my love of water came from, that later translated into all my activities as an ocean explorer. So on. I can't imagine being told by my mom that I can't swim in the river. The idea of that is appalling to me, and for a community to live in fear like that, we need to look into this. We need funding to do a study, an impartial study, and to either to verify or not verify that there is a causal link between contaminants in the Athabasca River and what's happening in Fort Chippewa. And maybe it's not in the water. Maybe it's in the fish. Maybe it can't be measured in the water. You know, I had a meeting with Dr. David Schindler, who's been a leading, you know, kind of opponent of the science that's been done, that's been funded by industry, such as the RAMP program, the Regional Aquatic Monitoring Program. And you know, he's been highly critical of their science methodology and their obsolete instrumentation. You know, he uses a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer approach, and he explained to me, he went through it in great detail how he gathers his data, and he showed me where their data clips off and how his data goes to a much deeper level. And he's shown that there are in fact contaminants that are related to you know, the hydrocarbons one would expect from the tar sands. Of course, the counterpunch to that is that people say, well, it's always been leaching out of these exposed embankments. But you know, I think we need to respect the First Nations communities for having their finger on the pulse of what's happening to Mother Nature. And if they say the fish taste different and they're being affected and something's going on, I think it would behoove us to listen to that and find out for sure what these causal links are. Because you know, Dr. Schindler showed me pictures of fish that are being caught in ever greater numbers that have tumors on their bodies, that are discolored, that have bruising and deformations, and this is not normal. And you know, there's not a lot of data on the baseline back before all the mining started and before the tailings ponds were created, unfortunately, and the instrumentation wasn't as good back in the 70s and the 80s. But he was able to show me a fish survey that was done back at that time, in which you know, thousands and thousands of fish were caught and studied, and there were no reports of deformities, and yet they're showing up now with greater and greater frequency. So this all needs to be looked at very, very carefully. You know, I think it's impossible to imagine a refining process and an extraction process on this scale that did not have negative environmental impacts. I mean, that would have to be some kind of immaculate conception. So it's important for us to embrace the fact that there will be negative impacts. They need to be understood, and they need to be mitigated at the source to the extent possible. Now, you know, what does that mean? Well, we've got to slap you know, regulatory control on the amount of sulfur dioxide emissions and so on coming out of these plants. The CO2 emissions and so on. We've got to look at the tailings ponds and look at that very carefully. And I would suggest seriously considering a moratorium on future tailings ponds until that's understood better, because there are alternatives. There are technologies that are on the horizon to do it without tailings ponds, to do a dry fines process. It's still in the laboratory. They say it's 5 years from being scalable in the field. Okay, we're talking about something that's going to have hundreds of years of impact. Let's wait 5 years. Let's get the answer. Let's know more. I think this is reasonable. This is the precautionary principle. Of course, we need energy and we're hungry for it. I think the SAGD process that was mentioned earlier looks like it has promise, but in terms of the less of a footprint in terms of disturbing the surface habitat. But you know, what do you get with that? You're putting in almost as much energy into getting into the extraction process as you're getting out when you burn it at the automobile later. So you know, that's a brand new technology. It's only 15 years from the lab to some of the first operating plants now. You know, I saw the plants, I walked, I talked to the engineers. I think I understand how it works. It's fascinating, but you know, my suggestion to the oil industry would be, look at a way to have the energy going into that system be from a renewable source, as opposed to just burning natural gas or some other way of generating the steam. I think that would go a long way toward giving the public some comfort that this is being really thought through on a long-term basis. Now, whether you agree with the idea that climate change is anthropogenic or not, it doesn't matter, because I know it is, and the science community knows it is. To a 98% of them believe that to be true very strongly, and that is going to come home to roost no matter what the deniers say.